Yes, now we also have audio. Great. No idea how the audio quality is, but people will complain if it's not good enough. That is the... Alright, so it has been a while, so I don't think the backlog... I'm actually doing one thing here, so that we get a bit more screen real estate on our end. Just content. Alright.
Can you hear us, Tanner?
Let's do this oldest to newest.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Perfect. And hopefully the audio is also going over the wire. If not, too bad. So thanks everybody for showing up. We have finally a meeting again, but we have enough people to actually have a meeting. Otherwise it would have been very sad just me looking at my monitor, making random decisions which we don't want. So I suggest we just go oldest to newest and then just see what falls out. I think this one we have talked to death, it seems, because it keeps coming back up. Then are these two ready, or should we buckle them up with the bundle them up with the hardware review that we do?
Neither of them are strictly tied to the hardware.
Okay, then let's just take a look and see where we land with that. All the ones marked ARM are probably not part of that, right? We should probably keep them as part of the hardware review.
Yeah, all of the ARM ones should be part of the actual meeting.
What about this one
2
here?
weeks from now.
Same. Okay, this isn't the first one. No, we just go over the backlog and decide what we're going to do with that. So this is enough tabs for now. So let me search.
We need Stephen for this one. It was bugged on him.
Did he respond back?
No, we basically.
Why am I looking at it now? How did it escalate so bad? That, okay.
I'd get stuck on step 1.
I like the picture though, it's pretty funny. Very good at that. Alright, you wait for Steve on this one. Tan or Eric, does anybody want us to walk us through this, or should we just read it top to bottom?
So basically, today we expose several types in system numerics vector which operate on float, but for certain types of programs, float doesn't provide enough precision for various operations, think like CAD programming and the like, where you may need the additional precision that double provides. This is basically proposing we expose new types corresponding to each of the existing types that would cover double, but we also make it generic so that we could extend it in the future to other types as well if needed.
Specifically half.
Yeah, like half or quad or int.
I see.
So at this point, the originals will become redundant once we have the generics?
They could potentially become redundant, yes.
Is there any efficiency cost in making them generic?
Not that I'm aware of.
What do you mean?
Like, I mean, these are obviously performance-sensitive types. I just don't know whether the perf changes when you change something to generic.
Oh, it's
assume not, but
If that were a problem, wouldn't it also affect vector of t? Because I would imagine that the JIT has highly optimized all of those types, or could be changed here, right?
Yeah, the only limitation that I know of that exists today is you wouldn't be able to take the address of these vector types, but there's a C# proposal to fix that. So I'm not sure that should be blocking.
So what is the proposal to fix it?
basically allow you to take the address of any struct, even a generic struct, provided it meets the constraints that it doesn't contain a reference type.
Oh, I see.
Wouldn't that require unsafe?
Yes. But some people use these types with unsafe code today.
Yeah, but wouldn't we be extending that group to encompass more people than who do it today?
No, what are you saying?
What I was saying was some people use the existing vector 2, 3, and 4 types with unsafe code. If they wanted to also use vector 2 of t with unsafe code, then the language would need to be extended.
So no, it's
'Cause
only
you
for
can
people that
take-
do unsafe, but the problem is as soon as you're generics, you can't really take address off.
Right.
Yeah,
T.
I guess what I was asking is what about people who don't want to use unsafe? Would there be a translation between the generic and non-generics? Also for, like VB developers?
No,
I
like
don't
I
know
think
if
the
you
scenario
decided
is
this.
you're using unsafe code today, you're using vector 2 today, you're switching to a vector of double. So today you can write address of, let's say,
Yeah.
X, right?
But your point is they're already using
Yeah, so
unsafe
people
code.
that are already
Okay,
doing
that's
unsafe,
fine.
the question is just like, they can no longer do unsafe because we don't have the
That's
language
fine.
support for it.
Yeah.
He was saying the drawback of using generics is that you can't.
No, I
take
get it.
address without-
I just didn't want to force people who weren't using unsafe to start using it
see.
to make this work.
There's also potentially a point on here where, so the current proposal exactly mirrors the exposed API for the existing types. There are some potential problems with the existing types that have come up before, such as the fields being publicly exposed, and the naming of various parameters, which it might be a good opportunity to fix these. So instead of exposing individual fields, expose properties that wrap them, which allows you to make it read-only, which makes in more efficient, etc.
Cool.
So this feels like a larger review item though, because we probably want to go over the whole thing, I guess. And we probably also want to think about what that means for the overlap, right, with the existing types.
These are presumably just transliterations of what we currently have, right?
Right.
So the names and everything, notwithstanding what Tanner suggests, we wouldn't change.
Yeah. How do we actually implement like add with these types? We just say you can only use them with float and double, and so we just specialize those two things.
It's like you need I-addable, really. That's okay with
Yeah, that's
that.
the problem. When you tie to that design, you'll never ship.
Today these things are recognized by the JIT, right? So they're intrinsic when you can use
Oh, they
SIMD
are.
operations, and then there's software fallbacks for the cases where you can.
Right. So, but then the question is the software fallbacks. Like, how would you implement them? Because you can't add two t's, right? You would have to say if t equals float, then cast to float, do the thing, and then if double, do that thing, and then else,
then
like,
throw
yeah,
else.
you use the wrong type.
Which
So-
is what we do for vector of t. today.
Right. Like for vector of t, though, we support way more than just float and double. So would we support them for all numeric types or just float and double?
I would assume we would do whatever we do for vector of t today, but was
Right.
that the thinking,
Yeah.
Tanner?
The current proposal is just have vector of t do float and double, and then other types would be reviewed on their own merit as they came in, because supporting like int here would require additional work in the math library as compared to float or double. So there's additional work and review that would need to be done for any other type of t.
I know this is an implementation question, but would we also, making this API, would we also have to change the JIT to start recognizing these? Or would we start using hardware intrinsics?
I would think that hardware intrinsics would be a better use case here, as it would simplify the implementation required for the JIT, which would be no changes to the JIT required,
Right.
other than maybe the type recognition.
So how about this? I will table this one here, and we do a dedicated review for this work item, because I feel like we probably should also invite Jan and some other people onto that to actually do the whole thing, and then because it doesn't seem like a triage level item, maybe just wave it through. All right, then add system numerics half 16-bit floating point number conforming to one. That sounds reasonable.
That easy.
Yeah. So for this one, the proposal is we expose an interchange type called system.half, which represents the IEEE binary 16 type. There's already hardware support today. This would be required for the hardware intrinsic classes that have already been approved for F16C in the ARM half ISA. But it may also be required in the future for certain interop with various machine learning libraries.
Is it commonly referred to as half in the spec?
Yes.
Single, double.
Yeah, I understood the
Half.
single double. I was thinking half too, but I was just trying to figure out if half is the right thing
So you actually misspoke, like it's system numerics half, right? We're not proposing it to put in system.half.
for it. Yeah, that makes sense in there.
You said,
Yeah, I had thought the original proposal was system.half, but it looks like this one says system numerics.
Interesting.
The question is, when someone types H on the default template, should they see half?
Yep.
Probably not. Because
Other
nobody's interested.
other complications with this too is that there's the IEEE format and then there's the bfloat 16 format, which is kind of, I don't know if Google proposed it, but they're the ones that use it in their machine learning, and it's a different, it's a different layout.
The bfloat 16 and the system.half have entirely different use cases due to the range of values that they can represent. But core CLR is spec'd to be IEEE, so if we were to expose one in the system namespace, I would think it would be half.
And Tanner, we've consciously decided we should wait on bfloat 16, or is there any harm in adding it because we know we're going to add it anyway?
It probably needs to be added as an interchange type in the future for certain types of interop.
Okay.
But I don't believe there's been a formal proposal put up for that one yet.
And is there a better name in the industry than bfloat 16? I guess it's definitely
Not that I know
half, in
of.
other words. Okay.
If we had both, this would be called half.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. That also sounds a bit like a larger program. It's like similar to like char 8 or UTF-8 string, right? Like it's a new primitive type, and I think we should probably think this through of like what are the cases where what's language support for this? Does it need language support? Like, can you multiply them in the language, right? Like, how does this work out? And
Well, so for half in particular, the only hardware support that exists and the only use case for them today is as interchange types. So there's no hardware support for adding them or subtracting them or anything else. They're purely used to save memory space unless you're working with a GPU. So the API proposed here is the bare minimum to be able to
right.
basically convert between half and system.single.
That's
and do
fair.
some basic checks on it.
I just want us to think through like what happens if this becomes a full-featured thing eventually, right? I would be very sad if we would have to introduce system.half later because, well, it turns out we didn't design the type as to be an exchange type, right? And that's what I'm saying.
Well, I'm sure people will request math support, etc. in the future.
Exactly, and that's why I said like we should probably go over this whole thing and then make sure we list all the concerns that we have of introducing a new exchange type at that level, and then see what works falls out.
The backing would be somehow packed into a single. Is that right?
No, the backing value would be
2 bytes.
2 bytes.
Yeah.
It's just the conversion would happen from those 2 bytes to a single. And
Because
then
if it's an
back.
exchange type, obviously we care about what the backing storage is.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So if we added the math support later, and right now that math support was done by the conversions, it would be a breaking change to add the math support directly later, correct? If we're changing it to a single, doing the math and coming back, that would result in potentially different values, wouldn't it?
If the conversion is lossy, it definitely would, yes.
Yeah.
But the conversion is non-lossy for
Is it? Okay.
half to single and back. It can be lossy for single to half.
So if you add 2 of them, if you have 2 of
But
them, convert them both to singles, and then add that together, Now the conversion
there
from
are-
that single back to a half would be lossy.
Yeah, there are specific IEEE rules for making sure that you compute all your results correctly, which is basically for any operation, you compute to the infinitely precise result and then round. And exactly what an operation is varies at the IEEE spec level.
Right.
Suffice it to say, the correct result for every one of these proposed methods is well defined. We don't need to debate that.
Correct.
Because we're not proposing the math operations right now.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing with those is adding them later might be impossible. That's the concern I have. Like, it's the same discussion we had with char 8. It was like, you know, what kind of language support do we need? Because if we don't do it now, we can never do it later.
So why can't you do it later? I missed that.
So the thing is, if you add them, let's say as operators today, let's say you have a a concat operator like a plus or whatever on like an actual user-defined operator. If later on you want them to be primitives in the language, you can no longer change them. And sometimes you want them primitives in language because you want specific behavior that you can't get with user-defined operators. And so that's the thing where you would have to decide what to do with them.
In the case of half, float, double, etc., there's a little bit of a difference because there is no language-defined semantic like checked or unchecked that could change the behavior of the operator. There's only one defined spec for that operation, and it's exact.
But you said if we go from single back to half, if we went from half to single, did math, and then went from that result back to half, that last step is lossy, correct?
It can be lossy, correct.
So we could get different values if we add math support later. Therefore, this is a breaking change to do later, correct?
It's only a breaking change if you have an implicit conversion. So that was the problem with System.Math and why we had to add MathF. There was an implicit conversion from single to double, which meant that if we added the overloads to System.Math, anything that was previously passing in like an integer or a float could now return a different result. If there's no implicit conversion, then there's no risk of there being a breaking change by adding the new overloads.
Okay, so the only time there would be a breaking, you literally couldn't do the math unless you created your own operators, and us replacing those operators we would take as a breaking change without too much concern.
Well, no one else could add methods to System.Math. So as long as we don't define an implicit conversion,
And you just won't be able to do the math?
Not with the
they
operators.
could do the math themselves, but
Okay.
they have to do their own library in like my user namespace.math.
Right, okay.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I think there's more nuance to that we should probably go over. I'm not sure that the triage meeting is the right way to do that. So that's why I would also table this one, because it's like a very involved thing, I think. Jesus. Do we have any simple requests?
Well, they're old, right?
I guess that's true. We only left the the hard ones.
I haven't thought through this, so I don't know. What are the implications to VB and other languages that don't support extra ref usage outside of parameters?
Well, I think there's a broader question to that, which is the discussion we had with Mads a few weeks ago about how do we version expression trees at all in a compatible fashion? Like, what's the expectation for new types to show up for existing implementations, for example, that are walking the trees? And I think that will be part of it, right? What happens if somebody overrides is by ref and says true? Right? What's the expectation for consumers? Do they blow up? Are they supposed to handle that? I think my gut feeling this is like it kind of has to be this way, like as in you need to be able to handle additive stuff. Otherwise, we can never ever add anything to it. But yes, I mean, there's certainly a compact implication, and I think there was the question of whether we can somehow version them in a somewhat inappropriate way, right?
Well,
but I don't think we can realistically, because there's not a single version for that.
There's both the versioning problem and also whether or not we're going to express something here. And off the top of my head, I think read-only-ref is in a category where VB simply can't express the concept.
Right.
So therefore, if it gets handed an expression tree that contains that concept, then it's rather problematic.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you use it, right? If you inspect an existing expression tree, it might not matter whether you
That would be
can
fine. Okay.
represent it in the language, but you would never get an instance from VB from the lambda conversion,
You're right.
right?
It would be that would be fine. Sorry.
But yeah, I think the question is like just what, I don't even know how you would use them. And also I'm not sure, like I don't know enough about isref and isbyref and expression trees to see whether this is actually the right API shit. That's something that the link guys should probably take a look at. Who owns them actually right now?
Vlad and Omar, they're on this.
Okay.
Is there any example of why somebody would do this? Because I'm a little confused by why somebody would do this.
No Vlad anymore, right?
Yeah, no.
Probably Kojan.
I didn't know. Omar, I guess, is the next one.
Yeah.
We have a lot of scenarios where
Yeah.
we use dynamic method and lambda expressions to generate methods on the fly. Think of things like serialization. This might be an optimization for that scenario.
No, it just our generation story is so bad.
Like my initial reaction to this is I don't like having isReadOnlyRef as a first-class bool type on these APIs, just because that strongly implies that that's the only attribute you can ever put on that parameter. And what if we want to add something like is not nullable in the future? Do we now have to add another overload of this that takes isReadOnlyRef and then is not nullable? Like it just doesn't seem future-proof. It seems like it should be a flag rather than a bool.
Flag enum so it can just expand.
Yeah, because I can imagine that as the language matures, we're going to want to add multiple different attributes. Not like a CLR attribute, but like the generic concept of an attribute to these parameters.
Yeah, like a modifier, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that I think needs some design work. So that's, I think, again, that's a work item that I think we need to take offline and like ask Omar and Metz's opinion on what should the direction be for this. I think it's fair to say that currently there is a gap here, which I don't even know what happens today in C# if you have an expression that involves refs and refs read only and you convert it to a lambda. Does it just fail? Does it do anything meaningful? I don't know.
Omar is not with the company anymore.
Oh, also? Okay, then we need to
We have
find
actually
something.
right now gap on expressions and on length.
So then-
Jared is the right person.
All right,
And there are
then-
two people actually who are supposed to own it, but they are brand new.
Perfect.
But Jared wanted to be looked in, so ping him. in this
Yeah, I'll
issue.
ping Jared.
CS Dawn and free.
Oh,
Look, an easy API. You wanted one, right?
yes. Thankfully, the person that wants it is here. So
Rejected.
Okay, close. It's basically a discoverability and performance optimization. It's faster to do contains than it is to do index of, and if all you want to know is if a memory of T or span of T contains something, well, sure, .contains.
Why is it faster to say, Chris?
Because the way that index of works right now is it vectorizes the search, and then once it says this vector contains the match, now it has to go element by element within that vector and see what actual item in here matched. You can avoid that last step.
I mean, just from a usability standpoint, I hate using index of and then compare with, or ask whether it's larger or equal to 0, which is the column on string. There's some overload that's missing, I think. I mean, it seems in line with what memory extensions already does, so. At least the right combination of overloads, though?
Sorry?
Are you sure that's the right combination of overloads? Span would only span.
You might also want contains any.
So we need the span ones because it's extension methods that don't show up, right?
Yes.
Right. I think it's the same problem we have on the existing. Yeah, we already have all flavors.
It's the same pattern we use on all the others.
Yeah. It's just noisy. And then you have an equality comparer, which seems reasonable. Do you want a string-specific one as well?
This, you mean read-only-span of char? Or?
Well, there's a read-only. So the other ones, the compare and index ones, have read-only-span of char and string comparison as an argument instead of the comparer, which is the enum.
Sure.
So that seems like something we should probably do.
No one was asking for it yet, but sure.
There's just consistency with what we already have.
The idea being contains this string.
Right. It's basically like the same as index of, except that it doesn't do.
We don't have
No,
the string
there
components
already
for
is.
index of. do we?
There already is a contains that takes a string comparison.
What? There's one.
Yeah.
There's an index of read-only span of char with string comparison.
And there's a contains as well.
There's a contains. Never mind. The contains one already exists. Yeah. Good call. All right. Perfect. Then this was as good as go. That was easy. I don't even know how to approve APIs anymore. I've done this in a long time. All right, method definition, get semantics. I feel like this one is, yeah. The guy does not respond, so no.
Yeah, I just pinged him.
Yeah, this is the other thing. Wes, did you talk more with them about this after this?
No, I haven't talked to him.
Yeah, I think that's something we should also come up with a design.
Fowler was interested in this one as well.
Yeah.
And
So the problem that we have with this is we need more nuance here, right? So the problem is JIT might not be enough. So the problem that we have is there's a proposal to support expression trees. To support interpretation from ref-emit. So the idea is that you can ref-emit anything, including types, and have the CLR completely interpret this. Now the question is, do you want to do this if you know it's interpreted? So how do you separate these two things, right? Because I mean, there's this general problem of like, well, is this the right API to ask, or is the other API I would like to say is like, well, it's not supported at all, and maybe we should have a different pattern for that. And then
This is crossing over with this done standard discussion about the feature.
well, there's that.
APIs
Yeah,
too.
there's the capability API aspect to it, and then also I'm not sure that's the place to put it because runtime feature was, I mean, ignoring the name for a second, but it was designed for the compiler to figure out what features will be available at runtime.
Yeah.
Which might not be the right
Static
API.
version. Yeah.
So this is the JIT proposal. I feel like this one needs a bit more design work. Needs design work with.
Why wouldn't it be in runtime information?
Might be.
Okay.
Might also be on ref-emit APIs itself,
Yeah.
which is what we talked about too.
Yeah. Or
The
they
problem
could-
is for some of these APIs
or
you
they
may
could
have a
just
loop
try
proxy.
ref-emit real fast, catch the exception, and remember.
Well, the problem is it will not fail, right? If you have an interpreter. So if you have a ref-emit based interpreter, you may still want to say, interpreted IL is still slower than, let's say, interpreted expression
Right,
trees,
right.
right? So how do you make that trade-off if you don't know what's happening? All right. So this was not.
So yeah, you might end up with is ref-emit fast instead, right? Otherwise, you could have a JIT with slow ref-emit.
Yeah, is interpreted or something, and then.
Right, that would be better.
I like his slow ref-emit. I like that.
Right,
Sorry,
so
sorry.
is ref-emit fast?
Is ref-emit fast? Yeah. Faster.
Faster.
Faster than what?
Super fast.
Alright.
Some of those look easy. I always say that, and they're cursed after that point.
I was about to say, you just branded them all as incredibly hard. Thank you. Link favorite feature removal. Didn't we approve that? I feel like we talked about this.
We talked about it, and we were trying to figure out how to rationalize it with the rest of the linker stuff that the Xamarin guys have and whatnot.
Okay, that's fine. Then, I guess. Okay, so I think we are in alignment with the namespace and the assembly location. I don't know where they put it now. Did they say?
Looked like they said a new contract system runtime linking.
Well, that's where I said no way in hell. And then apparently Jan said the same thing, and so he said he updated the proposal, but I don't see the. Maybe he just removed the statement about. I mean, frankly, I would expect this to live in MS Scholar or something, right?
Yeah, that's
Wherever
where
the core
system
assembly
core
is.
lives, right?
Yeah. So that seems reasonable.
Were we exposing it publicly though?
Yeah, so that was the. I think I don't remember now. I think the feedback that I gave them is like, do you need a public API? I think this is the link time feature removal. Okay, let me just respond here. Didn't we talk about this? This sounds very familiar.
We talked about trim on read-only memory of char. This is a generic trim.
Yeah, but oh, for arbitrary elements.
Yeah.
So it's,
I see.
so T-trim element, this is everything, dropping everything after that? What does the trim element do?
It's in the particular example given here.
Yeah.
Every element at the end of the span that matches a trim element is dropped. You're basically reading from the back. The first time you see an element that's not the trim element, you stop and just return what you have left. So it means that the trim element can be present in the span. It just has to be in the middle or at the front. It can't be at the end. For example, consider that you're trying to trim a period from a piece of text.
Right.
Because maybe you want to normalize 9 point to just 9. The trim element here would be TrimEnd period.
Okay, got it, okay.
Is it useful to have actually a list, array, or enumeration of the elements?
Yeah, what's the use of the generic API?
I don't know, to be honest.
Do we have trim on anything other than string?
No.
I've never trimmed anything other than string ever, I think.
I suppose that if you had a large array of integers and you were filling from the beginning and they were pre-filled with either -1 or 0, and then you wanted to ditch the ones you hadn't filled because it is span, and so you might over allocate and then trim. So I made that up. Okay, I'm feeling
It's
a
a
little
valid
smart,
scenario.
but it's yeah. So I don't know why. There's a lot of situations that this makes sense, but I wonder if it's for something like that to keep you from having to write.
Or it may be that there's different, like the equivalent of trim chars. You may want to have more than one value. I guess you just do this repeatedly because it's cheap. But
It's actually non-trivial to trim multiple characters from the end.
You mean calling this multiple times is
Yeah.
non-trivial?
Calling it multiple times in a loop is non-trivial.
because you're walking an arbitrary length.
Well, because the naive way to do it is, say that you want to trim A, B, and C from the end.
Yeah.
Trim A, trim B, trim C.
Right.
Oh wait, now I have to go back to the beginning because there might still be an A. It's a bug farm.
So I wonder then if it's worth thinking a bit more about what the actual use case is, because you might decide you need trim elements, and I don't even know what that would be.
That's
like.
what
There is in
that's
there.
proposed here.
At the end of the table. Oh, okay. Sorry.
For instance, system string already has overloads of TrimStart, TrimEnd that take an array of characters to trim.
Yep. I mean, I would say it's consistent with what we have. If you want to extend it to arbitrary t's, that's what we would have to do.
I've never seen it on a generic though.
I mean, I also cannot recall this ever using, and I also don't think we can add a
There's also
subset
like
of this.
default ones, right? Like the very first one, trim. 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 T
trim default T.
Yeah, there's no trim element being passed in on that very first one.
I would
Right?
say no. Yeah.
Which one?
I think trim in our set also doesn't do default of char, right? It basically just says space, I believe, right? Well,
I don't think it's just space. I think it's white space.
Oh yeah, well that, yeah. So like I think they mean, okay, so we can cut
It's either make it
3 of
character
the
specific or cut the default ones.
And by the way, the title says about memory and span. We are by putting in on read-only-span, we're going to cover everything.
No, because they're extension methods, so yes,
Because
it's times
if you had a
2.
memory, now you have a span, and you don't have a memory anymore, so you didn't trim your memory.
And you don't know how to trim the memory.
Or you get back a span. You get back a read-only span.
Yes, but if what you need is a read-only memory, that doesn't help you.
This is why when we discuss string-based trim methods, we put them on read-only memory of char,
Yeah,
not just
so
read-only span.
I think we would need a use case to know why we're, like, we can come up with some degenerate things, but I don't know that most people are ever going to use them, and they're easy
Yeah.
enough for people to write, and the complicated cases they should solve for their complicated case. So this seems like superfluous API to me.
Yeah.
If you're using this like a string.
But we added the one for char.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
the
already
string one
in.
already exists.
Yeah,
Oh.
because that one was, we're making the string API
I missed
for
that part.
span and memory.
My bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
This is for ints and GUIDs. I don't know that I want to trim GUID.
Yeah, I think Kathleen's case was actually the most common. You over-allocate and then you just trim off what you didn't fill in. But to be honest, at that point, you probably have the index I, which is the last index that you filled in.
Yep.
And at that point, you can just slice yourself without calling trim.
Yep.
And if not, you're in the simple case where it's a single value, so the trimming it yourself is not as bad as it would be if it was multiple values.
Yeah.
Because you know what you've stuck in there.
Alright.
There might be some good use cases in the machine learning world, but
I'd
unless we see.
be shocked if that's true, but I mean,
Maybe.
sure. I mean,
The
any sort
thing-
of buffer manipulation can be
The thing
found
that I'm
anywhere.
missing
It's
is
a shocking
the
world.
general use case
Yeah,
Yeah.
instead of an
Agreed.
invented use case.
agreed.
I would say it
Make him
seems
step up.
Oh, that was still marked ready for review, by the way.
fair enough. See, as I said, I'm no longer knowing how to do these things. Needs work. Perfect.
This allows you to get hash codes of substrings. ASP.NET needed it, ML.NET needed it. We don't expose it as a public API. This is a proposal to expose it as a public API.
Seems very reasonable to me.
There
Let me just
are
quickly take a look at the existing
3
ones.
APIs that would be added to support this scenario. One of the competing proposals was to, instead of have GetHashCode as a static method on string, put it as an instance method on span of T. The problem is span of T already defines GetHashCode and the behaviors to throw, which also means we can't make it an extension method. And we don't want to change the behavior of span of T GetHashCode where T is char, because now GetHashCode sometimes throws and sometimes returns a value. And that would just be confusing.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Is there a better place to put it though than string? Like,
I don't know, like putting it on string actually kind of says I'm going to calculate you in the same way I would have done for a string,
right.
which is the contract that it gets.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, value makes sense.
Oh, the other reason that we don't want to just change span of T GetHashCode is that it means we also have to remove editor browsable number from it, which now means it's always going to show up.
Does it have to be virtual on compare info?
Every other method is, but compare info is sealed, so I don't know why those methods are virtual.
Oh, that was a discussion I think we had about.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. Seems reasonable then.
The specific use case for that one was I want to put slices of strings into a dictionary,
Basically.
more or less.
ASP.NET already has, they have a type called a path segment, I believe, which is
String
exactly that.
Yeah, string.
String segment, yeah.
So for this one, if I remember right, in order to break a reference on ACLs, we moved the ACL relevant functions into extension methods, but you can't do that with the constructors. So the constructors are just lost. And as Jeremy points out, that's not ideal security-wise because it means you have to create an object and then subsequently writes on it. So he's proposing new methods that don't exist on NetFX.
So that one I'd like to table for now, for the sole reason that I was just going over the spreadsheets from our,
And
customers.
this one comes up often. I've seen it.
Yeah, so this one comes up, but there's a bunch of other ACL APIs that come up, and
Every time this comes up, I'm like, oh, did I miss something from oh, it's that guy again.
yeah. So I think we should think about what we do with the existing APIs, how we best what patterns should we use to convert them, because the other option is we just suck it up, right? We just put them back where they used to be, and just say, yep, tough luck. We have ACL APIs in the core that happen to throw on platforms that don't support ACLs, because that's the odds. And so to me, the reason the way I would decide this is how many of these APIs do we have, right? If this is a ton of APIs in that bucket, it might be the better way of doing it. If it's not a lot, if it's just literally 5 or 6 things. Probably.
Partial of them, partly they are, not all. The base ACL stuff is in the shared framework.
Where does that stuff live right now?
The packages.
I don't know the name.
System IO, access control. The base stuff is system access, security access control.
We know from data they're going to keep hitting this in real conversions. So really the question is, do you want to get them to write their code, change the code, or do you want to not?
Exactly, and that's why I'm saying to me there's either we have new types.
We already have new types, by the way. There's already existing types to expose most of these things in those NuGet libraries.
Okay.
There's either static methods to replace the constructors, and there's extension methods for instance methods that used to exist. So I think we already have coverage for all the ACL APIs.
What was the thing I was recently looking for? There was
the one that's I think has been a little bit tricky is the pipe security on the file.
Yeah, I think the one that I looked at was eventing. It's not eventing, threading. There was the event API that I forgot, manual reset event or something like that, and that had a create from existing or something, and that doesn't exist anymore. And we don't have a replacement for
That's just
that.
an oversight then, because we can add extension methods for that.
Yeah, so yeah. But you get my point, right? I think we should look at all of ACL APIs that show up in the porting.
I would
and
send
then
this back and ask Jeremy to talk to relevant parties to understand whether it's possible to put them back. Because I think we'll just keep having this conversation. As soon as you start having a conversation with a converter saying change your code, you're losing the conversation.
There's more landmines phenomenon is basically what it would be. That's what it amounts to be. It's not that we don't have any already. So
What would it look like today? It would be missing method exception.
No, well, if you tried to run an existing binary, you would be missing method. If you tried to compile, you can compile errors. You can fail.
Well, we have so many of those that we've created a tool to catch them. Right? Just add more to that tool.
let's flip this back to this.
Because the problem with API needs work is it enters in the mass at 500 of them.
Right.
Hopefully he doesn't forget.
That's true.
Looks like he didn't change it anyway.
No, I did, but it's a different. It's assigned to him, so hopefully that means it's taken care of. Don't we have this? I swear to God, I've seen this before.
vaguely remember we didn't have any move.
Oh, this is funny. I think this came up in the PR for Microsoft Visual Basic file system that's currently going on, and he has to do interop because this doesn't exist.
We don't have the override. Yeah.
So I was asking him to take the interop off and call the IO functions, but
I don't think we want to write that code, yes. I agree with that.
We don't have the override on any of these overloads either.
Oh, we have replace. That's what I was about to say.
we have it on copy apparently.
Directory move, directory info move 2.
Yeah, file info that move to doesn't have an override.
Oh, I see.
I don't know if it should be file or file info or both.
Probably both. If we're gonna add it, we should add it both.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay, let me type this here because. Was it file info and directory info?
Yeah.
What does directory info actually rely on? Like, is it?
Good question. I was just looking at the move to right now to see what they do, but
I think it just calls to this API, right? I believe.
Said directory info.
Oh, I misspelled it. Is that the point?
Yep.
director.
No, we're introducing a new type. We're committed to it now.
Well, that's what admins are, right? Directory info. All right. So, yeah, I think once he answers that, I think we can consider this approved. It's just.
Is the underlying OS API to take this? Do we really need to call it delete first? It seems like there's a reason.
No. This is the thing on Windows font only uses, which actually can be passed as flag. But he's saying you can also do this, but
Yeah,
that
I don't like that alternative.
no, that is bad. It's like there's like a million things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, if we have
CustomAttributeData.
on Linux or Mac, like, is that what we do? Or do we throw?
That's why I asked him the question like, how does it implement on the cross-platform thing? All right. Custom.
I mean, you know,
Attribute type property should be virtual. Wes, have you seen this before?
I haven't seen the request now, but I mean, I've seen custom data attribute. I'm just reading why.
It seems reasonable to me, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, custom attribute data. Oh, is that part of the LMR port, probably?
What's
Guess it's-
2800?
There was probably a bunch of other things that we already made virtual for the same reason. No.
It's not the LMR port, it's the metadata reader port.
Yeah, that's the replacement for reflection on the load, right?
Everything else in reflection is virtual. I don't have a problem with this.
Yeah, I don't think there's any. Thank you. This is awesome. Where is this? It's under. Oh, I'm an idiot, that's why. Good time. I see. Yeah. Alright. I think we're.
Yeah, sounds fine.
If I can only type.
Of course, it's going to be a divergence, but that's okay.
Well, we have generally not considered making things virtual or breaking change, right? It probably is.
No, I'm just talking about the divergence between platforms.
Oh. Well, that's a different problem. But I don't know how to fix this without moving it. Alright. Interesting.
Shouldn't the link be long, at least if you're going to be allocating large arrays?
No, the number of elements in the array is always constrained to 32 bits.
Still,
Yeah.
31 bits.
31 bits, yeah. Sorry. But you can allocate an array of like 2 billion longs, for instance. So
I'd say fastest are reading portions of it.
This gets to array pool stuff. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So that was the idea, is that like we dump the bigger ones on the large object heap right off the bat, and we can get rid of some of our other caching things that we still have in Corsealer. Potentially.
Would we
So
actually
we don't want
use
these.
this API? Would we actually use this API in the framework?
Actually, wouldn't some of
This
our
one?
crypto paths
Yeah.
use Jeremy?
That's what
Yeah.
Jeremy just suggested, right?
Oh.
That we will get rid of some pooling and stuff.
Oh,
So
okay.
So yeah, array poolish stuff.
No,
So
Jeremy Martin, I thought that we had scenarios where we wanted to allocate arrays that the GC wouldn't move around because they might store secrets. If we put them in the large object heap from the get-go, even if they're small arrays, that might minimize their exposure. I thought we had talked about this a few weeks back.
I mean, we've talked about various ways of making compaction not be a security problem. But,
The clear memory thing makes me
compaction,
really
compaction is
nervous.
only a security problem when you consider memory inspection to be a threat.
So, but yeah, this is particularly useful for long-term pins.
Sorry, say this last part
Like
again.
we have this for like overlapped is one of the things that needs that.
I see.
That we have a really semi-complicated way of doing it. We keep trying to age them and so on and so forth. It's a very old cache that we have.
But isn't this the
pinnable buffer.
opposite of allocating into the large object heap? Because this looks like it's allocate something that should be too big and leave it in the Gen 0 heap, and then let Gen 0, or at least let in the Gen 0 collection phase.
Default's -1 though.
Yeah, but why
Which
would you
means-
ever pass in 0 for generation?
Which means the GC would, I mean, that's the opening sentence. They want to allocate a large object in the Gen 0, or as a Gen 0
So-
object.
Why?
Because you're going to nuke it as soon as you're done with the operation.
Yeah.
You want a big array, but for like 3 lines of code.
Well, you can choose, right?
there.
Well, that's the problem, right? If you allocate something that is bigger than, I think, 65K, you don't get to put it in Gen 0, right?
How large is Gen 0 by default?
Something like that, 65K or something.
So
Yeah, well, that's obviously subject to change, but you know, the clear memory part of this again goes at the array pool. Most of this comes from discussions that I had with Jan and with Mayoni. It's specifically, you know, one of the guarantees of array pool is that like we don't clear memory, right?
Yeah, and I still maintain that's bad behavior.
On output. I know you don't like that, but it's like from a performance standpoint. I mean, if you don't want, you clear on putback is the way array pool works currently. If you care to have it clear.
So my feeling on this is we shouldn't be introducing APIs that allow people to violate type safety. Like if you really want to allocate a large array and not clear the memory for the object that you're allocating, like the API should be marked as dangerous, put on the unsafe type, something like that. Like it shouldn't be on
that part is fine. You know, the whole clear memory thing is called unsafe or whatever. I mean, right now you do that. I mean, we do that for all of our stack stuff, right? For most of our assemblies, anyway. And there's Jan's comments down there.
Okay, they are saying that T cannot contain references.
Yeah.
If you make, which I guess at least makes it memory safe.
Well, the GC simply can't work otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, like otherwise you have interesting things that the GC might do when it walks the heap. Yeah, but I think the question is, yeah, for ints and longs you may not care, right? Depending on what they're up to. Yeah.
For ints and longs, you might not care until you do.
Which is generally true for almost everything. Yeah.
So the reason I keep coming back to this point is because when we had this discussion a few months ago, like I typed in I just went on GitHub and asked who's calling arraypool.rent, and the third match on GitHub was assuming that the data that they got back was zeroed out. The third match. Like, seriously.
Well, which is still the case here. I mean, not giving you by default something that would be bad. Like, you literally have to say clear memory true or
no, you don't. You literally just say false.
That's what I'm saying. Sure.
You type in the word false. Nothing about the characters FALSE means I'm doing something unsafe.
Oh, you're just saying when you look at the call set, you can't tell.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
So, you know, having an overload was probably sensible for that.
Yeah, you could imagine like allocate large array and allocate large array uncleared or whatever.
No clear or something.
Something like that. Uninitialized.
Or unsafe.
Like I'm okay with the functionality. I just want the call site to be very explicit that you're violating the type system.
That one I think I can move to. I mean, I'm also questioning, like, why do they need that? Like, do we know we need it for sure? Or is it just they added it in
for clear?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, it's a performance thing.
If you're about to fill it
around array pool.
Is that not what you know what was there before?
Yeah, I guess
you know, the array pool like trims itself now. That was the feature that I added in 2.1. So this becomes more of an issue of when it used to always retain, right, forever. You'd only pay the cost once. So for long running processes, you know, this can add up to more significant more significant of a notable improvement because you're going to be hitting zeroed things if you do stuff periodically. Or an empty array bucket in the array pool is more likely.
Okay. All right. So then, to summarize, I think we are generally
before
supportive.
a couple of questions. Can I allocate actually a small array with this as well?
Yeah.
Even though what is it called? Allocate large array, kind of like obfuscation, or it's the main purpose.
I mean, the main purpose seems to be to allocate something not in the large object heap, even if it should have triggered a large object allocation. So it's allocate.
Yeah. Kind of override.
Allocate without the large object heap is what it really is called.
So there's
so that's the intent, but at the end of the day, this does something more, right? So
I mean,
So, yeah, well, it's actually counterproductive to, go out. The small arrays, I believe, are optimized.
So, sorry, what was the
Well,
behavior?
people will start using it for the clear memory. It was false on that stuff, right? Or for doing random shit with generations.
I think the idea is that you're not supposed to do it for 8-element arrays, right? Because the benefit of this is that you basically don't get to clear, but if you only have 8 elements, it probably doesn't matter.
So keep,
right?
keep in mind, if you pass clear memory false and say generation 0, like you haven't done anything anyway. Everything coming out of Gen 0 is already cleared.
Right.
Like it's already been cleared by the process of GC.
Fair enough.
We literally just bump a pointer and that's out. I'm curious, what's the behavior if you say I want to allocate a 50 megabyte array in Gen 0? Like, do you expect it to fail, or do you expect it to go to the large object heap, or what?
Yes. What
It's
happens?
Naomi's API, so it's whatever
Yep.
she wants to do.
They're royal.
Yeah. Another thing, like, what if you pass, nonsensical generation, and is there actually a way to say LOH, or is it Gen 2?
But I mean, even allocating crypto buffers directly into Gen 2 would reduce compaction.
And maybe we just say the generation's a hint, and if we can't fulfill your desired generation, it just goes wherever we think it can go. Which would be fine, as long as that behavior's not correct.
I would even throw, honestly. Like, if you're doing this, like, tweaking, actually, it mightn't break. Yeah.
The problem with that is that, God
Yeah.
forbid we actually change our segment sizes and then suddenly code throws where it didn't used to. Right?
Yeah. So if we just like regress, if we regress perf, when you're using this, like, it's not super guaranteed. That's what we're saying.
I think it's okay to say if
Yeah.
you mess with perf, then you may have to remeasure when the new release comes out because some invariant has
Yep.
changed, right?
And this is like super advanced API, so like, tough luck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, using GC in general is super advanced, right? So,
Yeah, fair enough.
sorry, I got booted.
What I'm paranoid about is that even innocuous cases, people will say Gen 0 clear memory false, not realize that it's not doing anything, and then all of a sudden we change a behavior when they're in production. And
What do you mean by that?
because
What
like
would change?
their production environment is slightly different than their dev environment, and
Mhm.
now things end up on the large object heap instead of Gen 0, like they tested, and now their performance just tanks.
Because we decide on the spot.
Yeah.
We believe, instead of like, hey, if you're building against this is the limit, 64K,
Yeah.
and if you're, or whatever, like,
Yeah. Well, maybe they're
Yeah.
on like an IoT device or something where the Gen 0 heap's even smaller.
that's a good point. But again, like, you're super optimizing with this API, so.
What do we want to
Our
call
policy might be like, hey, we cannot put, if you ask for Gen 0, we're gonna try 1, 2, 2 before we go into LOH, or before we go into 2. Is LOH actually like free, basically, or is it Gen 2?
I think it's actually separate.
Separate, right, so.
Yeah.
That's all weird.
So what do I pass if I want LOH?
-1.
Free?
I think I said -1.
No, -1 is
No, it's just to decide.
is
GC max generation.
Oh yeah, it's the oldest.
Okay. Gen 2.
Okay. Oh, we have GC just next generation. Got it.
Is Gen 2 effectively LOH?
Nope, I just asked.
That's the best of my knowledge, based on how things used to work.
Okay.
I believe that's correct now, that there is no real separate LOH per se.
Okay. So let's assume that it's Gen 2 for now.
GC next generation property.
So I believe she merged them. I'm
Okay.
I wouldn't stake my life on it, but I'm pretty confident.
My information's yours out of date anyway.
Okay. All right. I think I wrote up all the questions we had. Tell me if I missed something.
One more question. What's the behavior if you pass clear memory false and you pass a T that has references internally?
It blows up. They said that.
That means that we can never change existing structs to have references if they previously didn't have
That
references.
is correct, but there's a bunch of APIs that have that behavior today. It
Those
generally
APIs are
doesn't
all in
change.
unsafe.
Sure. It doesn't change the fact that the code will blow up, right?
Yes, but I feel less bad about blowing up unsafe code for things like primitives. Or, I'm sorry, I feel we're never going to change primitives, obviously. But I wonder if, like, we're potentially breaking or we're potentially allowing a break for, like, the ecosystem. If, say, you produce a package, your struct has 3 fields, int, and now all of a sudden you add a 4th field object.
Right.
Now, whoever's consuming your type will break.
You said you wanted the clear thing to be on an obviously dangerous API anyway. Obviously dangerous APIs means there's no.
I'm
guarantee
assuming
this
I'm
will
not
work
going to
in
get
the
caught.
next
So I'm trying to, yeah.
I'm not sure how you get that broken, right?
What do you mean?
I'm not sure you're...
Like the scenario is, I use Levi's package. His struct today has 2 ints in it. I call this API, say don't initialize. Then Levi adds an object reference to it, and suddenly when I pass his struct to this method, then it blows up because, well, not even an object reference in it.
Well, yeah, it blows up, sure.
So like the thing is that you
That
basically
I get. I thought you were saying it was possible to actually get through the API. I'm sorry.
No. I'm wondering, is it okay if that blows up due to taking a new dependency of a package?
And I would say yes. You're calling it advanced thing with...
Yeah, I'm not sure that what you said earlier
general,
is
but-
true, actually. Like, I think there's other cases where you pass in structs, you instantiate things with value types, and if you use something as object reference, it will blow up today as well. Like, we added the
I'm
query
starting to
API.
use the unmanaged constraint in quite a few places.
Yeah, it's not a constraint. There is another API we added. I forgot what the name is, but basically it amounts to you pass it a type and you say, does this thing contain any interior pointers effectively? Sorry, any
Yeah, there's an
NGC
API
references.
runtime helpers for that.
Yeah, and I think the reason we added this API is because the constraint doesn't work in all cases, right?
Yeah.
So the idea was that you can dynamically check those things and then blow up early, right? And so those are the things where you're probably not in unsafe context. You just call an API, pass in a T, and then bad things will happen. So I think it's unfortunate, but I think it's okay because that seems like a corner case scenario anyway.
Well, can we at least, if we do have an overload, can we constrain T to unmanaged? Because I can't imagine many scenarios where you're going to pass in arbitrary T's here.
Okay, that
it's
is
normally going to be
fine.
byte or something else, right?
If we, that's a good one. The other benefit of having an overload is that this one could be constrained to... What's the name? Unmanaged? Is that actually the thing in C#?
Sure.
I don't know.
Because like if you're creating a library and you have a generic method that is unconstrained, and then you call allocate without zeroing out, like something's clearly wrong there. I can't imagine anyone would do that in practice.
Perfect. All right, I add that. Now let's go back here. We happy? GC APIs are always fun.
And we have the first user lined up, Ben Adams.
Yep.
Surprise,
Of course.
surprise.
I was about to say. Actually. All right. Can I send this back to Maoni, or would she be upset if I do that?
No, give it to her.
All right. So. Oh man, those words. I think we talked about this. This looks familiar. No, open 10 days ago. That is this. But we have
Is
talked
this
about
the,
this.
generic method T0 basically?
Yeah, we had probably a previous version of that. Isn't it the 16567 linked, by the way?
Isn't this already internal?
God knows. Yeah. Oh yeah, I think we talked. Yeah, that's what we talked about. And where did we land with this?
I think we approved it.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, sometime.
Right. So basically, what this one was, for those that don't know, the problem that you have is you want to instantiate a generic method. The problem that you have is you need to find the generic method first, and then you have to instantiate it. And so the idea was maybe we should have a way to make the search faster, so we don't have to walk over all the methods with the name, so you can at least, search for by the generic parameter count. And then I think there was another one where it was about, you just a one-liner where you can just say, just instantiate this one guy, so you can just pass one method and say, this one, these are the arguments, and then find the corresponding one. I forgot what the actual code sample was, but yeah, this was large. Yeah.
And then we had the variables, representation, that type of stuff, right?
Yes, something like that. And then my generic signature type. And what do we call what the signature type is again? As opposed to a normal signature?
I think it's the first generic argument, the first specified generic type argument, I guess not a parameter, in a generic method. So I'm looking for a thing that uses T0, T0, T1, T2. It's like, well, you need to be able to say, I need the placeholder type 0.
Yes, that one sounds familiar.
Because it doesn't have a type until you instantiate it, but it knows that there is a positional type, and so I think signature types are
Type of
positional
list,
types in generic methods.
This makes sense.
Yes, it does. Yep, I think that sounds fine. Any concerns with that? Everybody just stares at the
Because if it's the number
What does it
type,
do?
I don't understand why there's not a number. Unless the signature type is to build a theoretical closed instantiate, but then I don't know what the type is. But if it makes sense to Addy, it's probably right for reflection. He's the only one who understands it.
Well, is there a sample of using the new API?
Yes, that was the very bottom one. I mean, it shows the implementation, but yeah.
No, that shows the implementation, but
Yeah.
what about someone calling this method?
Well, he's trying to replace the stuff over there, right, that we have. So what's the new way?
No, because the generic method parameter 0, that there's an already existing public API or an existing internal API.
For what? For the make generic parameter 0?
Yeah. Because that's what I thought that.
That's what
he
we
was calling
approved
the
in the
signature type.
past, right?
Okay.
I think. Let's
Maybe.
check APIs.
Because that's what I thought the signature type was.
I think the signature type is, you're right, I think it's the generic parameter effectively, right? But I think, so this is basically this one here, right? The make generic method parameter is basically doing the, what is it, bang bang 0 or whatever?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, so this is signature type for bang bang 0. And now he says, well, make a generic type that takes this one as an argument. So he needs to basically do this, right?
Yep.
And then, and now he can say, get me the method with that name, but this is the type parameter, and then with one argument. I think. Yeah.
So where are we getting all of this?
Yes, so he basically needs it in order to implement a non-runtime implementation that is just reflection-based. But he doesn't want to do this in qualib, so he needs a public constructor to do these things, and so that's why he needs the method.
I guess I still don't know what a signature type is, but
Yeah.
Welcome to reflection.
Yeah, whatever.
Generics are hard.
Okay, so we approve it because we trust him. All right.
Yes, I think that's basically what it wants to.
There's a bool on type called this.
Oh, that's the one we just looked at.
Yep.
Okay, how was it?
all right. So it's making one of those, whatever one of those is.
I was making one of those. Let's say that.
Then are you still online?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. Adding big.
So the proposal here is basically the IEEE spec for floating point type says that we are required to expose 4 different rounding directions, and we're not exposing 3 of the 4 that are required for binary floating point types. These are 2 positive infinity, 2 negative infinity, and 2 0. When you're rounding towards an integer, these are equivalent to truncate, ceiling, and floor. But when you're rounding to a specific number of digits, we have no operation that can do that today, which can help you account for various floating point errors depending on your input depending on your input data. So my proposal is we should expose these additional rounding modes both to be more IEEE compliant and to allow users to correctly account for inaccuracies in the floating point algorithms.
Yeah, I mean, people will not be happy, but I think just search the internet for midpoint rounding and try, like, all the people that are trying to do rounding and nobody knows what the fuck these things mean. Like, it's not super hard, but it requires, a decent amount of understanding of what the fuck is going on. Like, it's a typical problem of everybody runs into rounding not doing what you want to do because you have this rounding from school that is one way and then you have the other rounding.
So,
and we add 3 more rounding types, but I think I don't see an alternative to that because if you need the function, you really need it, and I don't know where else to put it, quite frankly.
to ask a naive question, if we added the midpoint rounding enum in Framework 2.0, how has it been 12 years and we haven't done this yet?
Well, that's true for
The
virtually
same reason why
all
we didn't
APIs.
add the single precision floating point types until I went in and added them for 2.0.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Is there a risk that some customers might have switched on only the 2 values that are there right now for midpoint rounding?
Yes,
And
we
now
can write that code.
Yeah.
Sorry, and what?
Introducing new enum values isn't that a compat thing?
You mean like if somebody wrote a switch statement and
Come
they
on.
only expect 2 cases?
Couldn't do anything.
Nothing stops anybody from passing a method that's going to do a switch on the thing from passing in the number in top max value.
No, but in practice, people don't do that though.
Just that their code's already wrong.
Yeah.
Adding enum values is not a breaking change.
Yeah. Okay. I will remember that.
We
I would-
couldn't touch a thing in the framework
I
otherwise.
would say like, I take your point. I just don't think many people will write a switch statement against midpoint rounding.
Yeah.
Well,
Like,
it's
I
not.
mean, it's
It's
usually
not
something
really.
you pass in to somebody else to do the.
Okay.
So that's
I mean,
my argument.
When there's 2, they're not going to write a switch statement.
They're gonna write
They're
an
gonna say, if it's
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is
Zero,
I'm
maybe.
checking through the framework and I see that in quite a few places.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will probably.
Which I mean, we can always change it, right?
To
Yeah.
clarify my statement, it is a breaking change.
Yeah.
But we allow it.
Okay.
It's an acceptable breaking change. Yes. All right. Seems reasonable then now. Are these the names you want?
I might be missing something. Is it really midpoint rounding for
Yeah.
these 3 operations?
For rounding to an integer, they are not exactly midpoint rounding. But for rounding to a specific number of digits, it does impact midpoint rounding. So, for example, for 2.0, 11.5 will round to 0, as will 11.6.
What about when It's not necessarily ints, right? Like if I want to round to one decimal place, right?
Yeah. Then the
11.
second digit impacts the midpoint rounding of the digit that you're rounding to.
Right, but in this case, when I'm saying to infinity,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the midpoint, right? Like if it's 0.01, to positive infinity would give me the next. Right? It's not midpoint.
No, I think you're right.
I mean,
just
I'm
think
splitting
the,
hairs a little bit on
No,
that
no, I think you're
enum,
right. I think it's just
But-
the enum is misnamed. Probably should have been just called rounding mode or something, but because it's clearly not just midpoint, right? Already, right? Because if you call an API and you say round to 5 elements after the period, then you're not really, I guess midpoint is the wrong way to look at it, I guess. But yeah, because you're rounding to whatever precision you want to round to.
Right. Where the two values today
Yeah.
are only for cases when it's the midpoint.
Yeah. But midpoint rounding is the only one that we have in the framework, so like for better or worse, that was the name they picked in .NET
Just making sure I
framework
fully understood that.
2.0, and they added it.
It will need a good documentation.
Well,
That's for sure.
That we already have that problem. Yes, it's like this type is not something people.
Well, yeah, I mean, the definition of this is specifies how mathematical rounding should process a number that is midway between two numbers. And then these three values are not going to be for when it's midway.
Right.
It's for midway and for slightly less than midway.
Yes.
I mean, I guess one advantage is when you call math.round, IntelliSense is going to kick in and say, well, here are the 4 values you have to choose from.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really care
It's-
about the name
yeah.
of the enum so much.
It's midway, it's just using a much higher standard deviation than you expect. It's statistically the midpoint.
1 minus epsilon.
God. All right, Tanner, you're up again.
Is he still there?
Okay, so this is similar to the last one where the IEEE spec specifies a number of operations that are required to be exposed, and we're not exposing all of them. These are the ones we're not exposing. For some cases, you can't emulate them using other instructions because the IEEE spec says that these operations must compute to infinite precision and then round according to the current rounding mode. So if you were to do 2 operations like a multiply and an add, it would be 2 operations and you'd round twice and get a different result. These are also useful in various places for doing floating point manipulation at the lower level, which allows you to build more complex algorithms.
So is anybody asking for those, or are you just literally reading through the spec and noticed that we don't have
So
them?
for I partially went through the spec, but people have been heavily requesting fused multiply add, mostly as as automatic support in the runtime, but having explicit support would help solve some of the issues that exist today, like the precision differences that could occur by automatically doing that conversion. Copy sign we already have today, but it's internal and we only use it internally. Next value and previous value are basically the equivalent of increment and decrement for floating point operations, which we also use today, but we have to do using bit converter +1 and then convert back. And then ilog2 and scale2 we also effectively use today in various places by extracting the exponent using bit masking and shifting.
That seems reasonable to me. I mean, naming is interesting here. I mean, copy sign lower s, is that intended?
For which one?
Copy sign, shouldn't it be capital S?
Yeah, possibly.
Because even
What's the I in ilog stand for? Integer?
Yeah, integer log, which is somewhat different from log2 in that it can return a more precise integer when the integer is not exactly representable.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm not super concerned with calling it ilog because I mean like log is also already, or like, you know, 10H, right? We kind of use those already. So within the math class, I think it's.
With the I.
But shouldn't be L capital?
You mean because it looks
Should
like
be
it?
int log? Or I don't.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
ilog like the actual math name for the operation?
Oh, I see what
I
you're
don't
saying.
know. Like, because it's an abbreviation, right?
It's
Yes.
log B in IE.
Well,
As we have in comments.
one of the things that's listed here
Yeah.
is that the C API is called ilog,
Yeah.
which might help for discoverability.
Yeah. I mean,
But Googling ilog, it is, that operation is not on the first page.
Is
IBM has a product called ilog, it dominates.
I would call it
ilog B is on the first page.
int log, maybe.
I mean, honestly, I'm fine with either name. Okay, I can go with intlog, I can go with ilog. I mean, it's ilog is a little bit unfortunate because the I and the L look basically indistinguishable. But that's the trouble. I mean,
And then I left a comment that next value and previous value might be named better as increment and decrement, but since that's their effective operation, but I didn't know if that would be confusing to people.
I mean, like, math.next value double doesn't say anything to me. I don't understand how math is an enumeration.
I mean, the description in the comments here makes it clear what it's going to return. It's just weird.
It's not a whole number increment, right? It is the next small. the
Yeah,
next-
it is plus bit value 1.
Right.
So, you know, next largest value, previous smallest value, or I don't know. I feel like I should throw an infimum and supremum.
Yeah, I mean,
Increment kind of makes sense in that it is incrementing to the next representable value, just like int does with increment.
But again,
But int increments by a scalar every single time.
yeah, I think.
Well, it increments by the next representable value.
Which
That just happens to be 1 integer.
yeah, but I think when people see increment, they're going to say adds 1, or they're going to think adds 1.
So it's like
Yeah.
next largest and next smallest.
I don't know, what about bit increment, bit decrement?
That might work.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me.
I like it better than just increment and decrement.
Yeah,
Is that actually
absolutely.
what's happening in the implementation? In all these for float and double? We're just flipping, adding 1 bit, or are there other?
Yeah, it's just adding 1 bit and removing 1 bit.
Is that pretty heavily dependent on the what the structure looks like though? Like if we're gonna add
Well,
this for half, for example, is that gonna be the same?
If we were to add what?
Like if we have to have the same thing for half, or like the other representations of these floating point numbers, are they all this bit increments?
Well, all the IEEE types are.
Yeah. Okay. So this never moves between the mantissa and exponent. It's always in one of those places.
Well, according to the comment, it will.
Yeah, it's always the next representable value, which is effectively bit plus 1 for binary floating point values.
Okay.
Then I have no problem with the bit increment. Decrement.
Yeah.
And if you call next value on positive infinity, it does what?
It returns positive infinity
Okay.
because there's only one positive infinity.
Yeah.
So we would want the docs to say
Returns the next largest value.
until you achieve positive infinity.
Yeah. Decimal values don't work that way, but we also don't expose IEEE decimal types.
Okay. Any other renames besides next value and previous value? ilog. Do we want to call it something else?
I see that ilog 2 is base 2. That's right.
This one base 2, yeah.
Yeah, the B stands for base, and for binary types, that's 2.
I mean, if nobody feels strongly, we'll just leave it as ilog.
Do we want to capitalize the L or not? Or just basically say that ilog is one
Yeah.
operation name?
I'm
It's
looking
doing
at.
a cast, right? So what should we say? It feels a little weird.
What does
It's not exactly doing a cast. Under the hood, it would not call mathf.log2. It would extract the exponent and directly return that as an integer, which can be more precise when the integer is not exactly representable.
what does ilog2 return if the input is 0 or
I
negative?
heard what he said, but I have no idea.
I believe it's 0, but I'd have to check the IEEE spec. It lists all the special handling in there.
Should we instead call it log2 as int or something like that as opposed to ilog2?
I think ilog2 would be more familiar to people who have existing code. Which is, we've kind of gone with the C runtime naming convention for a number of the existing math types.
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly on the opinion that's probably the right thing to do because they're so specialized, right? I mean, there's not something somebody opens up the IntelliSense on math and tries to make sense of the operations, right? Usually it's like you know about a specific operation, you look for it with specific terminology, right?
Yeah, so Tanner, just to confirm, like I would expect like log2 that returns double to return not a number if I pass in 0 as the input. You're saying IEEE has defined what ilog2 returns as well?
Yeah, it's got exact handling. So it's got exact specification for both the integer and the floating point return log,
Okay.
and they are different in some cases.
Okay. That kind of blows my mind.
All right. So then so then
Just the copy sign and approved.
yeah, I copy sign. That's a good one. Copy sign. Okay. All right. All right. Tanner and Levi, you both win today. Got a bunch of APIs approved.
So this is basically just a specialization.
Oh, that's why you're here, finally? Waited a long time for this moment.
Well, and Santi wins too today.
Well, no,
No,
I've been.
We have
helping
other
this
things to
guy.
do first. Come on, come on.
We're not going to approve his API.
It's the first time you attend the meeting. You have to attend 10 meetings in a row,
It's the second
then we
time.
consider your API.
This is the second.
You have 8 more to go.
No, but this is basically just a specialized dictionary for strings to be able to use read-only-span of char APIs. And basically the discussion that is being ongoing here is either adding a new type that implements dictionary of string t value, or just adding extension methods for like try add and get value.
So what is the problem? The problem is we need to be able to look up with a span. And we can't do that on the generic dictionary because it makes no sense to do that for an arbitrary t. It only makes sense when the t happens to be string.
Yes.
And span doesn't implement equality like you did, like string does. Right? It basically
Right.
says, are you
Yes.
pointing to the exact same memory? Not, are you pointing to...
We can wrap a comparer with it. Right? We can pass a comparer.
Yeah.
Can.
Yeah.
A comparer of read-only-span? No, because you can't pass that as a t. I mean, you can't have an I-equality comparer of read-only-span of anything, because it can't ever be used as a generic argument. But, I mean, what...
read-only memory also.
Right. That would work.
Yeah.
But what's done here as a workaround is introducing a new interface that, that doesn't use it as a generic.
Yeah, that's the typical thing we do, which is very unfortunate. But
I think overall from the discussion, people agree that this could be better as extension methods. It has its pros and cons, and where for the generic methods we have to cast the compare to see if the dictionary was created initially to see if it is an I-string equality compare, and then use the read-only-span compares or comparison.
yeah, if only with extension properties, that would make the indexer so much nicer, right? Because you cannot really do an extension indexer today. But I mean, it's a bit unfortunate that the extension methods are basically having to bypass the and reach into the internals of the type to actually work at all. But having a new type seems a bit over the top. Yes.
Yeah.
So I tried, as part of the UTF-8 work, I was also experimenting with making string compare also implement equality compare of read-only memory of char, I think, and things just blew up because at that point type inference no longer works. Because you now implement equality compare of t and equality compare of u.
Yeah.
Things kind of are unpleasant. So.
Yeah, this is messy. This warrants more talk. I mean, I would say, I think the scenario is more than valid. We need to somehow do it about allocating for the probing, but using a brand new type seems a bit over the top for that.
Well, the brand new type being the dictionary type or the interface type that's being
Well, the
used?
interface type, I think there's nothing we can do about it, right? If you want to have any sort of polymorphism for that kind of thing, that's what you have to do. The same thing where we have span action and read-only-span action, right? Like that's.
I mean, if
that one I can live with. To me, it's more like having a new collection type seems a bit heavy-handed for that.
And it's a very specialized type.
Yeah. It is a very specialized type.
It's
should be
in
specialized.
Yeah, it should probably go into the specialized namespace. Yes.
Yeah. Is it part of the power collections effort, or
we cannot do it in power collections because we need to have access to internal implementation
What's
of dictionary.
What's our plan for power collections? To have them like on a site or something?
I think that was the last.
Yes, is to have them on the site and have them their own implementation.
Okay.
And for these guys, since it is
And will they
very
live in
specialized,
Perfect?
like we don't want to duplicate the implementation of the
Fair enough.
dictionary.
So, if you were willing to not take an arbitrary iString equality compare, and if you just took a string compare directly as a constructor parameter, almost all of the APIs that you need are available to you.
Yes.
So that is.
We could convert it, like what you're saying, the span to string, and then compare those two.
No, you don't need to convert span to string. They're the APIs that we already approved today take a string compare as a parameter for doing things like hash code calculation. There are already APIs on read-only-span of char.equals that take a string compare.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
But again, it means that you would take, I'm sorry, not a string comparer, but a string comparison, an enum. That might be a bit strange. But at least it solves a 99% scenario.
Right.
Yes, but you would have to take that in the extension methods, and the dictionary will still be using the compare that was created with, right?
Because you're using dictionary under the covers?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you would have to re-implement.
So if you use the indexers APIs and the dictionary APIs that you're not extending, it will use the compare that you created with, or the default compare.
Yes. So you would have to wrap your own compare around that, which you could do, it's just more work.
Yep. But like here, that's why we're like stuck with adding a new compare that implements the read-only span API.
Oh, you've actually subclassed dictionary. Okay.
Yeah, that's the first proposal, and then we came up, like if you scroll down, we did a comparison of like as extension methods and what are the pros and cons of in between both of them.
I mean, yeah, like if you do a derived type, that is actually not quite as bad.
Well, was dictionary ever intended to be subclassed? I know it's not sealed, but it doesn't like give you a notification when things are out.
No, but it's deliberately designed in 2.0 because ArrayList and hash table had virtual methods on them, so that, and then we said, fuck it, that's too slow. So we basically said in V2, list and dictionary are basically as cheap as humanly possible, and then you have the you know, the object model types, like the collection of T and the key collection of T that just wrap the other ones to give you notifications. But this is a slightly different example of the reason why we haven't sealed them, which is you may just want to add new methods to them. There was also pre-extension methods, and so I think it's in line with why we haven't sealed the type. What I like about the extension methods though is it just lights up on existing infrastructure, right? I mean, if you don't control the instantiation of if you don't control the type, then you can never look it up with a span, right?
Yeah.
That is still a very significant limitation of the design. Versus this one would just work everywhere.
Yeah, and I think I also rather make the internal field, the fields internal rather than private protected, right?
So this implies that you would need to pass in a string compare into the dictionary constructor.
Yep.
For the extension methods, otherwise you would have to convert to string every single time. Which
Yeah,
is gonna be sad.
that's the only overhead of extension methods, that people would need to know that when they create a dictionary, they need to pass this new specialized compare.
And that also means if you create the dictionary with the default constructor, which uses equality compare of string.default, I believe
then
your
we will fall
optimization-
back to the non-optimized string comparison.
Maybe that's something that should be special cased.
Why wouldn't you be able to handle this in the extension methods?
Because in order to use the equals and get hash code of read-only-span of char, we would need to have this compare to be passed into the dictionary.
You could special case equality compare of char.default and say your ordinal, right? I mean, that's something you could do at your end.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean,
But it is complicating the code, though, right?
No, it is. But I think if like honestly, if the extension methods still require that somebody instantiates the dictionary with the right compare, then I think it's on par with the derived type proposal, because it only works if you control the instantiation, which in many cases you don't, or at least control the compare, right? Which I think in practical terms probably means you control the instantiation of the object. Which would make it much, much less useful. Like if this just works on any dictionary instance and does something sensible, I mean, that would be a huge value gain. And then I can even live with the fact that they're slightly ugly, right? Because it's like, well, using spans, so you're already buying into slightly ugly, but man, you don't have to allocate a string to look up things in the dictionary. Look, that's cool. I mean, I don't know. That I think would be a reasonable trade-off.
So you're leaning toward the extension methods, the new interface, and the new APIs on string compare?
Yes. I have no idea what it means for the implementation. That might be messy as hell, but
yeah.
But it's a core type. I mean, I think that's okay to say, you know, in order to have things more performant.
Plus extension methods, everybody that has a dictionary with string key value will just get them for free instead of having to introduce a new type.
How expensive is it to pull out the comparer and see if it implements this interface and then do an interface dispatch? And from within the extension method.
Pull all the compare.
So dictionary.compare is public, right?
Yep.
And it's given to you as equality compare of string in your case.
Right.
So what you would want to do is you need to be able to call GetHashCode and the new overloads of GetHashCode and equals, right? So that means your options are try seeing if that equality compare also implements the interface, or try casting it to string compare and then do a virtual method dispatch. Is either of those acceptable from a performance standpoint?
Well, if we go through the extension methods route, we're already not caring about performance, right?
Why is
I wouldn't say that.
Because we're not guaranteed that the compare that we're getting is the one that are going to use the performance APIs of comparison. Because we still have to check what type of compare we have.
That is true, yes. So you could end up having an allocation.
Because we're going to...
What would you have an allocation?
Yeah, because we're going to say, is this compare of type iString equality compare, then cast it and use
If
the
you
APIs.
use your own custom comparer rather than using string compare, one of the built-in ones, then yes, you'll incur an allocation. every single time you call any of the extension methods.
Yeah, but that's true regardless of whether you go with the derived type or not, right?
No, derived type forces you to pass in a known string equality comparer in the constructor.
Yeah.
Sure, but I would just say you have the same amount of scenarios work, right? Or I would say the scenarios that work performantly on both sides. The other
Yes.
thing just handles more scenarios,
And
but you made a
less
great
work.
performance.
Yeah.
But it will not blow up.
To
right?
be fair, like,
Or it will not.
how commonly is someone going to pass in not a string comparer and not equality comparer char by default?
Exactly. I think most people will just. I mean, the vast majority of people will just use the default comparer.
We just tell them if it hurts, don't do that.
And the thing is that I would say that if the thing doesn't work at all for default comparers, that would be very sad because that's I think the vast majority of cases, right? And then yeah, string comparers are the other ones, right? Like ordinal ignore case, I think is probably the most popular one. Would be my guess. So if you handle both of them in a meaningful way, I think you have an if check cost, but I mean that you would have regardless, I guess, unless you are willing to blow the dictionary. So is there more design work than needed to figure out whether that's doable? I think. Do we care? Do people buy in my argument that it's better to work on any dictionary instance than it is to only work on the ones that you control?
It makes the APIs easier to use when you don't have to churn as much code.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I think is extremely valuable. Why would we need this guy here at all in the second proposal? Where would you pass this even in?
Oh, because you need that compared to that interface to implement high equality comparer so that you can pass it to the dictionary through the original APIs, right?
Oh, because that still assumes that you
Yeah.
only have that guy, I see. So if we work on arbitrary ones, then it wouldn't be a problem, right? You wouldn't
Yeah.
need the interface stuff. You could just extend string compare with these methods here.
Yep.
And call it a day. I mean, default is effectively ordinal, correct?
Yep.
Actually, I've not seen how the extension methods would work, to be honest. Like, maybe it's something that's called out in the implementation details. But if you're an extension method, the dictionary is going to give the way that you look up an entry in the dictionary is by saying, do you have this particular key? And key is typed a string, but you were given a read-only-span of char. How do you turn that into a string so that the dictionary's public APIs can look it up?
They wouldn't, right?
Well, if it's an extension method on dictionary, you have to call dictionary's public APIs. And there's no public API that takes a T key as
Well,
anything
I
else.
would
No,
expect
we
these
have to make some fields internal in the dictionary.
Yeah, that's what I thought. You have to introduce some sort of internal
So you're
API.
changing dictionary regardless.
Yeah.
Yes.
In both
Got it.
approaches.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now this has other problems. If you, I mean, you could do the following, right? You could make these internal methods on dictionary, right? And then you just forward them one to one, but no, you below dictionary, right? Because you now have what, 5 more methods that the JIT has to always JIT.
And it only makes sense if T key is string.
Yeah.
Yes, which is unfortunate. But if you make the internals public or internal, if you make the privates internal, well then you expose a lot of shit to all of them, let's call it, which might not be what you want. So, I guess these are the things. So let me just summarize what I just said.
So you were saying extension methods would work when you don't control the dictionary. But are there scenarios where you really don't control the dictionary in the hot paths that we're considering here? Like, I would think that the scenarios that are being talked about here are going to be very custom scenarios where you probably own the stack all the way up and down.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that would be my gut feel to this, that what I said is true, but yeah, I have zero data on that, right? I think, I don't know, I've seen plenty of cases where people have dictionaries, right? And like but they probably expose it as iDictionary, right? Or as key collection most of the time, so.
Well, the extension methods wouldn't work on iDictionary anyway.
Right. Well, they would if you could downcast, right? But yeah, probably not what you want.
Also, is GetHashCode of ReadOnlySpan of char different than String.GetHashCode?
Well, if you want an implementation on the comparer itself, that also makes sense in certain cases. So, like in the API that we had approved earlier, I put it on the text info.
Compare.
Compare info, sorry. String compare makes sense too in certain cases.
Because as extension method, the indexer will take a string still. So we could potentially be missing some data when we call get value of ReadOnlySpan of char, because the hash value is different.
Regardless of which implementation you end up going with, I think there's still value in maybe considering this as a separate proposal, just like you have here.
Is there a reason there's no set value? Oh, okay. Or was it just not a complete?
Yeah, these were just the extension methods that came up from discussing the primary methods.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let me just post this for now. I guess I should not like it more. Say. Let me actually fix this here.
Did you read Mihai's last comment? Overloads for a concurrent dictionary would be nice. It's like, if it's directly with the extension methods, right?
Yeah.
Well, concurrent dictionary is an iDictionary.
Right, but it's not a dictionary.
No, but if the extension methods worked on the interface, then you get it for free.
think I would rather have the concurrent dictionary extension methods than a dictionary extension methods.
Is there a place where we need this?
Not really. It was just a member proposal and for the power collections effort. But at the end, like, if we want to put it in power collections, we would need to replicate all the implementation that we already have.
Right.
Yeah. There are going to be bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, let's have one dictionary implementation.
But this could be really good for like the string interning.
So, I don't think that I'm feeling that I'm in a place where I'm strongly leaning one way or the other. I think they both have drawbacks. Like, none of the solutions seem to be things that we like. So I think that
A better way to phrase it is that they both have merit. They both solve a problem that people have.
Yeah, so the question is like how much of the merit outline, overcomes the limitations that it adds, right? So I would like to hear some other opinions from like Christoph and other people. Like, do we really think we should complicate our collection types for that in that way? Because I mean, I could totally imagine a world where we just add a new collection type into the Power Collections library for those people, and that's good enough, right? It's not in the core. Nobody cares. It's a targeted thing for those guys. But I don't know. It seems like there's a threshold of how many words do you accept in a design before it feels heavy or complicated. And like there's a few things here. Like you have the different interface that you have to add. You have to implement it on the existing compares. You cannot really instantiate the dictionary with the default compare without losing features, or you have to have a very complicated interaction between the extension methods and the dictionary, which might cause code bloat at runtime and you get more things that you need. So the question is like, is this whole package worth it, right? Like, because there seem to be no design where it's like, yep, you get the best of all worlds with version none of the downsides, and that's the thing. I mean, everybody who uses read-only-span of char today and uses dictionaries complains about the fact that they cannot index with that they basically have to calculate a string for indexing. But I don't know. They all seem to be like the same sort of people that are just playing with read-only-span of char, do a typical let me parse a text file and count words kind of exercise. It's like, okay, but how many real-world workloads do we have this problem that aren't already web servers where they already have their own implementations of those things?
We
Right?
hit this in ML.NET.
Yeah.
So what's the scenario there?
The scenario there was ML.NET today has its own string segment type called dbText.
Right.
That basically wraps a backing string and then has two ints, right?
Yeah.
Start and length. And we're trying to replace that dbText type with read-only memory today of car. And there was cases where we're putting dbText into dictionaries in the library. And
You cannot do that, yes.
right. So I mean that wasn't a playing, right? It was like we're actively trying to remove a type that solves this problem today that's duplicated with the framework type now.
So I do have, I'm going to be murdered for this. I do have in the UTF-8 string branch a string segment type that is intentionally used to be able, it can be used as a tiki inside a dictionary.
Right.
Like that's the entire reason for it.
And ASP.NET has one too.
ASP.NET has one, yes.
Which is all like reasons for like solving this
Yes.
in the framework, right? Because ASP.NET has one, people write their own, MLNet has their own.
But this is my problem, right? So like it seems like I have the same impression that everybody has their own version of string segment. As soon as you have it, this problem disappears, right? Because you can just say, yep, I just override GetHashCode and do whatever I want to do there.
Yeah,
right?
it disappears, but now you want to use two of these libraries together.
Well, that's why.
But you could argue that the fix of this is we add a string segment type to the framework, right? Rather than relying just on read-only-span of char.
Yeah,
Right,
agree.
which would be a different problem than this problem, right? Because this is basically saying, if the only thing you have is read-only-span of char, how would you change dictionary to do that? But then dictionary is just one of your symptoms, right? There may be other symptoms that you still have.
Right.
In which case, if you add the string segment type or whatever the case might be for how we actually name this, then this problem disappears and we don't have to do the ugliness here. And you do the same thing, right? So that's why I'm saying I'm undecided.
We have a lot of other ugliness now, such as a new exchange type.
I agree with that too.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm saying, like, to me, there's not, like, this doesn't feel like it's one of those things you just say, oh, let's just go for it and see where it leads.
But
right?
I mean, there'd be implicit conversions, right? Like string to string segment would be implicit.
It's implicit, to
Right.
span's implicit, yeah, it's all
Yeah.
implicit.
Yeah, the problem is usually they're only going one way though, right? Which is like depending on who's controlling what, you may find yourself in a spot, but you again have to allocate because you don't agree on the types.
Yeah. In the string segment, like we for read-only memory, we have exposed how to get to the backing string.
The string segment I have also does that because it's for compatibility with APIs that take string intent as parameters.
Yeah, that's the usual problem that you also have, like existing IR. Where read-only-span of, do we have a method from read-only-span of char now where you can say try get string?
No, because span never references the object.
For memory, it does. For memory, you can get.
Oh, for memory, yeah, that's right. All right.
Do you want to mark that as API needs work?
Probably, yeah. Good catch.
The work is decide which one, or even like, or these other competing designs, right?
So I think the part of the design work is like convincing ourselves that this is the path we want to go down.
Can you actually type on YouTube? Chat?
Right. How far down this rabbit hole do we want to
Here
go?
and there.
Well,
Design it.
This could lead to like adding extension methods to like hash set
Anything
of
that
strings,
takes- yeah.
sorted set of
You- you-
strings.
Right.
Sure.
That's what I'm saying. Dictionary just
Sure.
feels like it's the first.
It's the most
Yeah,
important,
yeah.
right? Because
But then-
because it requires you to have the behavior that these two things equal, right?
Yes.
And get hash code. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, one argument is it's you know, you only fix this one, then you are done, right? Because it's the most important one. The other argument is like once you start doing this, you will chase the long tail, and you put the same kind of ugliness on all the collection types. At which point it's like,
Yeah.
oh my god, do I want this, right? If only we would have added string segment.
Why didn't we when we had an array segment?
All right, guys. Thanks.